Okay, in this lesson we're going to look at arranging techniques and how to kind of customize your own guitar rack. Okay, so let's just start with the arrangement techniques. So as said in a previous lesson, there's a few ways of doing this and a few ways of duplicating objects so you can kind of start building up an arrangement. As you can see here, I've got this same clip now, all this next to me, but it's on 3 different parts. So let's break this down into 3 different ways of duplicating. So the first way of duplicating, if you click on a clip and then right click and go down to duplicate, what this will do is it will create another one of these clips on the empty slot below. So if we press duplicate, you'll see that happens. Okay, brilliant. So let's delete that. So that's the first way, duplicating just individual clips. The second way, as you can see, I've actually started creating layers of guitar now. And how I did this was I came up to the actual channel header, right clicked and duplicated it, and this will create another channel to the right of this one. So press duplicate, and now you see I've got a new channel which is exactly the same as these. Okay, so let's undo that. So as you can see, that's the first 2 ways, clip and then channel. The final way is kind of this idea of a scene. Now, everything that goes horizontally is a scene, okay, and can be launched from the scene button. So if I click on, let's say we do this bottom one, if I click on this and then right click and duplicate, it will create that whole scene directly below. Okay, so it's ready to be activated from the one below. Let me undo that. So those are the 3 ways of duplicating, and we're going to come and do a few arrangements because we've got a few things happening in the Next to Me song that we just want to kind of play around with. However, before we get onto that, I want to go back to last lesson where we looked at triggering this guitar. Now, if you remember, we came into this launch clip and we changed it from global to 16s. This, if you press on the scene button, is going to cause you a few issues. Now, the reason I say that is because this clip will trigger when you play this at 16s, whereas everything else is going to trigger globally. And that will make it out of time, because what you have to do when you're triggering, you have to trigger it before the 1. So for instance, if this is a 2-bar loop and I trigger on bar 2, it won't, or if I trigger it here, it won't actually come into play until it gets to this point here, okay? So let me show you that, whereas this one will come into play directly after the first 16. So here we go. Let me play this one, and you should notice this is in time still. Now let's go down to this one, and you notice it's still in time. Now we're going to click on this one, and you notice it's out of time. And you know, there's a reason why you'd want to trigger clips using this quantize, and absolutely there's loads of reasons. Do live stuff is fantastic, but whenever you're dealing with this session button, you really do need to make sure everything's in global, otherwise they won't trigger properly and you'll cause yourself a whole bunch of issues in that way. So I just wanted to kind of clear that up because a few people are going to stumble into that problem. So the next thing we can do is think about our arrangement. So what you can see here is I've started doubling everything up. So I've created 3 guitars. One is an octave higher, one is just a normal one, and then one that I'm going to create effects on. And as we come through and we start duplicating, we're going to think about layers. So for instance, if I create another layer, I press duplicate, and it comes below, I think, okay, for this one, I don't want the drums, I don't want the bass, and actually, let's just make it keyboards only. Okay, so we'll call this a break or something, so we can rename that. And we'll go rename, and we'll just change that to break. Okay, so now we've got 4 segments. So as we come through, let's trigger this one, and now we're going to go on to the next one and trigger this one. And after this, we do it back. Okay, so that's a nice way of arranging, and we can keep building up these parts in that way. Now, that's your next experiment. I want you to have a go at creating all these different channels layering the effects as much as you want, and then come down to arranging them. One thing I've done, if you look at the keyboard part in the verse, you'll notice it's this kind of very staccato eighth pattern, but when it gets to the chorus, it's this padded chord. So let me just play that clip on its own. Okay, so that's the part that I want you guys to create. So all you do in order to create this, it's very, very simple. You come in and you delete anything you don't want, and then you select these notes and just make them longer. And it's literally that easy. That's all I've done there. I haven't played it in. If you want to play it in, that's absolutely fine. And I completely encourage you. But because this is already played in, I've already got all the velocity. I've already got it exactly the way I want it to. So we're good to go. So that's one way in which you can arrange. So you should definitely play around with arranging these clips, duplicating things as you need to, whether that be the scenes or whether that be the channels. It's completely up to you, and working on these new ideas, okay? So that's the first thing. The next thing is looking at effects racks. So one thing I've done with all of these effects racks is I've used a compressor. Compressors are really good and they reduce the dynamic range, basically meaning that anything that's really quiet, they make louder, okay? So using a compressor is such a common thing, and I thoroughly encourage you to kind of get to grips with that. So that's the first thing that all of these channels have. And remember, the rack is a global experience across the whole channel. So we're doing it once over here, we'll apply it to every single clip in this channel, okay? So we've got our amp and we've got our glue compressor, and I've changed the parameters ever so slightly. Actually, no, I haven't changed these ones at all. But you can kind of hear how loud it is by using this bypass button. So if I just press go, and you can hear the difference it makes to the dynamic range here. Ready? Okay, so that's a nice one. Now let's come to our effects channel. And I'm just going to show you how to do this. So I'm going to create another effects channel just by duplicating this one and deleting all these by pressing on the header and pressing delete. And we're just going to set up our own effects. Now I'm going to encourage you to come into here and just play and see what these do. Now, because it's an audio channel, we have to be dealing with audio effects. So click on the audio effects and we can deal with any of these. So straight away, glue compressor is here. So if you want this, you can either double click for the blanket template, or you can come in and grab one of theirs. So let's say, okay, the one I've been using is the lead. Let's try this one. So we'll double click on that, and then we'll just see what it's done to this channel. So we'll press play on this. So it doesn't make much difference. So we're going to start just playing around with some of these parameters, okay? And actually, when you are dealing with compression, you shouldn't necessarily hear a massive fluctuation of dynamic range. It shouldn't be massively louder, but the quieter points should be louder. That's kind of what it does best. It makes those quieter points louder. However, if you do want to make the signal louder after you've kind of taken some of the signal out and put some in, you can actually use this makeup gain and then boost the signal again, okay? So now let's have a listen. Okay, so there's the first one. So the next one we're going to look at is, so we've done compression. Let's do a more a delay effect. So I quite like the ping pong delay. So let's see what they've got in terms of ping pong delay. Robot, let's see what that's about. So all I've done is double clicked on that and let's put it in. Now the good thing about this is you can actually move these around, and depending on what you're trying to aim for, you'll probably want to move these clips around and find out the best position for it. Now let me just show you something else. When I press play on this, you'll notice there's this signal path, okay? Now if I do this makeup gain massively, you can see that the signal path here is louder than the signal path here. And this is a really good representation of what's happening in the signal. It says, okay, it's coming into the effects rack at this volume. Then after it's gone through this processor, it's doing this. Then when it's gone through this processor, it's doing this. And then finally it's doing this. And you can see, as it comes through, it gets louder. Let's try this somewhere else. Try it right at the beginning. Let's try it without. Let's try another one. Now that's nice, I like that. Let's put it before the ping pong. Let's put it before the compressor, sorry. And that's a bit much. We'll just turn the feedback down. We'll turn the wet dry mix down a bit. And there we go, that's quite nice. So your mission is to kind of just play around with this stuff and see what kind of effects you come out. And there's so many of these. Another one for guitars that guitarists like to use is chorus. So you can come in, maybe grab one of the choruses and see how that sounds. And what chorus does just makes it feel like it's double. Okay, so loads of things to play with. That's as far as I'm going to take that. But actually, what you should be doing is think, actually there's a lot to play with here, a lot to do. And the best way of learning is just to get stuck in and just have a go with some of this stuff and find out what it actually does and how it changes the sound of your instrument. Okay, so have a go at that, and I'll see you in the next lesson where we're going to start looking at common chord progressions.